Well, you can have. Well, good morning.
Good morning.
Well, first of all, welcome to Japan. And I'm sorry about the accident. Airplane accident yesterday. Well, that's a bit shocking to me. Well, in 1985, in Japan there was a similar accident. Also, occasionally it happened, but in any case, that's a sad event. Well, let me start by introducing, very brief introduction of mine. Well, it's not as long as Hayakawa-san's introduction of NUCD, Well, very brief. Well, my name is Seijiro Iwasawa. Well, I showed the Chinese character. Well, I guess my ancestor lived in the mountain area. That's suggested by the Chinese character. That shows the rock, right? Rock and river. That's the my past. I guess my parents, wanted me to be sincere. Well, I'm not sure if I am, but so that's what my parents hoped for. And actually, my nickname, Seijiro, is kind of too long for when I was in these States. I made my nickname Seiji. So if you like, you can call me Seiji, or you can follow Chinese way, or Japanese way. Call me Iwasawa Sensei. You call Professor Sensei, right? So you can call me Iwasawa Sensei, or just Iwasawa is fine. Well, I was born in 1963. I got MBA in Boston, Boston U, and then I got PhD at Harvard. But as an academician, I have a little, strange background. Very until recently, I was working for Nomura Securities. That's an investment bank. Well, what's famous about Nomura is that back in 2008, it acquired the European division of Lehman Brothers. So, for the last couple of years at Nomura, I was working for the ex-Lehman guys, which was a fantastic experience for me. And then since 2012, this is third year, I've been working for this school. I'm enjoying teaching. My main area of research is something called behavioral economics and behavioral finance, which is fantastic. And here I'm teaching behavioral economics, behavioral finance, and the macroeconomics, and such and such. Okay, so much about the introduction. So today, I'm going to talk about the Japanese economy. The purpose of this lecture is to provide you as a basis of understanding, what's going on in the Japanese economy. So I start by talking about the post-World War II history of the Japanese economy, and then as you know, the current economy of Japan has many problems. So I'm going to talk about that. And then as a final topic, I'm going to talk about something called Abenomics, which is the name after the name of Prime Minister, Mr. Abe. Well, part of the Abenomics is to promote women to be more productive. So I want to discuss that. Well, but the main purpose of this lecture is to provide you as a basis, like I said, of the understanding Japan. So, given this lecture, you probably are going to have lots of questions about many things. That's fine. If you want to say something, if you have questions, raise your hand. Push the button here. Use this. This is a speaker. Okay. So use this. Well, if you have a large voice, you don't have to use that, like myself. So feel free to raise your hand, at any point of time. That's okay. And I hope that if you have some questions about giving this lecture, I heard that you're gonna leave Japan on Sunday. Is that correct? So you still have a bunch of opportunities to ask questions, for Japanese people. So probably, I hope that you use that opportunity. Okay, let's start. Well, let me start by showing this simple picture, which shows the nominal and real GDP of Japan since 1956. Well, how do you feel? What do you think is the what do you think you can learn from this simple picture? Well, I found a. Are there any volunteers? Well, thanks. You are a coordinator, right? Well, I suppose that I want students to raise their hands, but that's okay. Well, what's obvious from this picture is that, up to 1990, the economy was growing. But since then, it's been flat, basically. Okay? That's the first lesson. Okay? Well, what's more subtle is the relationship between nominal GDP and real GDP. What do you find from this picture about nominal and real things? Well, nominal, GDP was growing faster, up to 1990. But since 1990, nominal GDP, growth of nominal is slower than the real GDP. Okay? So that means that, up to 1990, inflation was the norm. Okay? But since 1990, the opposite, deflation is the norm. Okay? That's no good. It is usually the case that the nominal GDP grows faster than the real GDP. But that's not the case for the last 20 years. Well, I will come back to this issue later in this lecture. But before I move on, let me summarize what I said. Well, so the Japanese economy experienced very high growth up to 1990, but since then the economy has been stagnating. And in terms of nominal versus real, nominal growth was faster up to 1990. But since then, it's not the case. So obviously, the turning point was at around 1990. So why was that? What was going on? Okay, let me explain that. Okay, so here's the growth rate. Okay, I showed the real, economy, but the size of the real economy, but this is growth rate. Obviously, back in 50s, 60s, the growth rate was quite high. We were experiencing the double-digit growth. But in 1970s, the average growth, slowed to 5%. In 80s, 4%. And since 1990, it's been flat, zero growth. Well, slowing growth is not necessarily the Japan unique problem. Well, in Japan's case, it's a bit extreme. In 70s, it was more than 5%. It's zero. But more or less, similar problems are found in many advanced countries, such as the U.S., U.K., France, Germany, etc. Probably this is not the case in Taiwan and in rest of Asia. But in most advanced countries, there are similar patterns, right? So I will talk about many things, many issues, surrounding Japan. But I want you to think that I don't want you to think that this is Japan unique problem. Many problems are shared by many advanced countries. Well, let me talk about the factors that enabled high economic growth in 1950s and 1960s. Well, there are a couple of issues. Okay, first of all, I'm going to talk about the favorable demographics, okay? And the use of competitive forces, and thirdly, the benefits of global treatment. Okay, so let me talk about the demographics. Okay? Well, later I'm going to talk about the recent trend of the population in Japan. But what's surprising is that the population was highly growing, back in the 50s to 70s. In fact, the average population growth of Japan from 55 to 70 was something like positive 1%. Well, currently it's negative. So obviously, the population growth was one of the positive factor behind the high economic growth after World War II. And another thing, I have to mention is the this thing. On the right-hand side, you see the chart of the share of agricultural population in Japan. Well, have you seen any agricultural area since you came to Japan? Well, probably not. Well, this afternoon you're gonna visit Toyota. Near Toyota, you may find the agricultural area. But obviously, in Japan right now, share of agricultural population is quite small, like 5%. But just 50 years ago, just half a century ago, share of agricultural population was as high as 40%. Can you believe that? It was quite high. Okay? And how does it have, how does this, have anything to do with the high economic growth in of Japan, during that period? Can anybody explain? Well, it was quite high, back in 1955, and since then it was declining. How did that contribute to the economic growth in Japan? Can anybody explain? Well, it's something that has been going on in China, right? Don't you think so? Well, in China, still the share of agricultural population is quite high. Well, I don't know the number, but I believe that it's still high. But it's declining. In the meantime, what's going on? People are coming to city area, urban area, and they start working for industries, right? And what do you think? Relative to compare, urban industries, such as the automobile industry, steel industry, relative to agriculture, which productivity is higher? Obviously, auto industry, steel industry, those productivities are higher. So, mere shift from the mere shift of the population from rural area to urban area contributed, significantly to the economic growth. That has been going on in China and what's going on in Japan as well. Okay. Well, but obviously that's saturated, in 1980, when this share declined to 10%. Well, okay, so that's this is the demographic pattern. Okay, is my explanation clear? Well, do you understand what I said? Yeah. Okay. Okay. Well, Asian students do not show the not show their approval or something, anything like that. I want you to show your understanding or complaint or anything. Okay. Okay. Let me move on. Okay. So let me talk about the industrial policy. Okay. Well, when people, talk about the high economic growth of post-World War Japan, they often mention the power of the government policy, industrial policy. Yeah? Well, because the Japanese government, promoted, many industries to grow, that has been successful. That's the argument of many economists. Well, I'm not, a strong buyer of that argument actually. Well, the industrial policy was actually effective in some industries, such as steel. Well, because in the steel industry, heavy capital expenditures are required, and if the capital expenditures of the industry is too much, then the prices of the demand, the market of the steel is going to collapse. So the regulation of the government is to some extent necessary. But the power of industrial policy is not too strong to regulate the automobile industry, which is the leading industry of Japan. And I want to talk about that. Okay? So let me read, what I wrote. People often mention an industrial policy driven by METI. That's the government actually. Okay? METI successfully led the Japanese economic growth during post-World War II periods. This is true to some extent, but well-informed economists argue that this is overstated, and that's my point. Okay? To illustrate this point, let me give you a quiz. Okay? How many car companies are there in Japan? Just guess. 10, right? Yeah. Can you name some of them? Toyota, Mitsubishi, Suzuki, Honda, Subaru, Nissan, Isuzu, Toyota. Yeah. Yeah. Well, Lexus is Toyota, so don't double count. But that's okay. There are many Japanese companies, right? Okay. Toyota, Nissan, Honda, Mitsubishi. Oh, you didn't mention Mazda. Mazda, Suzuki, Daihatsu. Right? So there are many, right? Okay. In Germany, yes. How many car companies are there in Germany? Okay, name them. BMW, Mercedes, Volkswagen. Maybe at most 5, right? Yeah. So, what about in France? Renault, Peugeot? Not anymore. So, in general, in one country does not have so many car companies, car companies. Well, back in 1960s, when the automobile industry began growing, the Japanese government didn't like that, didn't like this. Okay? So the government tried to car companies to merge. The effort was not successful. Each of them, said that they want to be independent, and that was good actually. They competed quite harshly, and that led to the innovation actually. So this is a case where competition led the technological innovation, and that led to the success of the industry. So the government policy was not effective. The competition was the promoting force of the Japanese auto industry. Well, the success of the auto industry was so enormous that, well, in 1980s, Japan's trade surplus began growing. what I show here is the trade surplus and current account surplus, which is the surplus began growing. And in the meantime, look at what's going on. U.S. Okay? I showed the U.S. current account at the same time. Okay? In 1980s, U.S. began experiencing the trade deficit. Okay? As this is a mirror of Japan's trade surplus, right? Well, so what do you think have happened? Well, here, in middle of 1980s, the U.S. government began, upsetting. Okay? They say that, Japan is scared. Okay? We have to regulate Japan. And that's what they said. Okay? And that created the most important turning point of the post-war Japan economic history. What's that? Oh. Look at this. This is the exchange rate. This is Japanese yen against the US dollar. Back in in the early 1980s, it was something like 250. What's the current level? Does everybody know? 120, right? 100, 110, 120. That's the current level. But back in 1980s, it was 250. Yeah. And obviously, this cheap yen, contributed to the success of the Japanese automobile industry, and it's not liked by the U.S. government. So what happened? Well, here's the most important event of the post-war Japanese economic history. That is called Plaza Accord. After the name of the hotel, that's in New York. This Plaza Hotel. This is the next to the Central Park. Well, what's the Plaza Accord? Basically, what happened was that in Plaza Hotel, the advanced nations, including U.S., Germany, agreed that the Japanese yen was too cheap. So they let the Japanese yen appreciate a lot. Yeah? That was agreed by the advanced nations government. And they intervened, heavily into the FX market. What happened? Obviously, the FX market responded. So in August 1985, it was 237. But in 1987, December, it became 122. So just in 2 years, the yen doubled. So what do you think had happened? Well, Japanese people were scared. Yeah? Well, the Japanese economy succeeded because of the automobile industry, because of the export. Yeah? And that was sustained by the weak yen. But now the yen is appreciating. This is the end of the Japanese economy. That's what many Japanese people, Japanese businessmen said. So, the government and the Bank of Japan responded to this concern. And the BOJ cut the interest rate. Well, currently, interest rate is zero, so it's not the, effective monetary policy tool. But, back in 1985, still, the interest rate was the main tool of the, central bank. In 1985, offshore discount rate of Japan was 5%. But in response to the concern of many Japanese people, the Bank of Japan cut the interest rate to what? Just in 2 years, it cut, the interest rate became 2.5%. interest rate lowered, significantly. Then what do you think have happened? Interest rate lowered, people can borrow easily. People borrowed money. What did people do? Buy borrowed money. Bought real estate. Bought stocks. And this caused bubble. Yeah? Okay? So this is the root cause. This was the root cause, the most important cause of the bubble economy in late 1980s in Japan. Okay? So once again, the story was that in the first half of 1980s, the Japanese economy was very successful, partly supported by the weaker yen, and then the U.S. government was mad, and then there was a Plaza Accord, saying that the Japanese yen is too weak, so they let the Japanese yen appreciate, and that the agreement was quite successful. The yen appreciated. In response to that, the BOJ cut the interest rate, and then that caused the bubble economy. Okay? So that's the story. Okay? The bubble economy was quite enjoyable, to say, well, honestly speaking. I graduated from the Waseda University back in 1987, and I joined the Nomura Securities. And my first job was something called an equity analyst. Well, what's the job of the equity analyst? We write a report, company report, saying that this company is attractive or not for investors or something like that. Well, the job was quite enjoyable because whenever I write a report, those companies' shares soar, no matter what the content is. Okay? So that was an easy job for me actually, quite enjoyable. And the salary of the security salary of the investment bank was quite high. That was a good period. So I was drinking every day. Okay, at that time. Okay? That was quite enjoyable. Look at what happened. Okay? So this is the trend of bank loans. Okay? Well, bank loans was increasing, obviously, but the growth accelerated during the bubble period. Okay? And look, this is the real estate price. What do you think? Is this normal? No way. This is crazy. Okay? This is obviously bubble. Okay? And what's scary is that the bubble collapses, subsequently. And that damages the economy. Okay? Well, this is stock price. Oh, what's the current level of Nikkei, which is the leading index of Japanese company? Something like 17,000 yen. Okay? 17,000 yen, that's the current level. Okay? But at the peak of the bubble, that's the December 1989, Nikkei was 38,000 yen. Can you believe that? Oh, this is bad, this is bad. Okay. Well, the more sobering story is this. Okay? When I joined Nomura, okay, the share price was 6,000 yen. Okay? 6,000 yen. Okay? What's the current price? 800 yen. Okay? Well, whenever I look at the technical chart of Nomura, I feel kind of sad. Well, maybe this chart symbolizes my life. Yeah? That's what I feel. So very sad. Yeah. So well, this downtrend of the stock price, sometimes makes me sad. But this is the kind of the result of this crazy bubble economy. Okay? So understand, to understand what's going on in Japan, to understanding the cause of the bubble is quite important. That's why I talked about this story so far. Okay. Well, let me show you, a couple of charts, showing how crazy the share price at the time was. Okay. Well, this is the comparison between the market capitalization of Japanese stocks relative to the nominal GDP. Okay. So in one period, in this period, look, market capitalization was a lot lower than nominal GDP. But the during the bubble era, it soared and it surpassed the nominal GDP. Okay? Price to earnings ratio. If you took finance course, you may be familiar with this ratio. To measure the value of stocks. Price to earnings ratio. Usually, price to earnings ratio ranges somewhere between 10 to 20. Yeah. But guess what? At the peak of the bubble, price to earnings ratio of the Nikkei was something like 70. Yeah. But even so, people were saying that, this is normal because the Japanese economy is strong. Yeah? Overconfidence. Yeah? Well, people do not realize that the bubble is forming. When the bubble is forming, that's the bad part of the bubble, actually. Okay. Well, this is another chart, indicating how stupid Japanese people were at the time. Well, this shows the what kind of investors were buying and selling Japanese stocks, in each period. Okay. Well, recently, the recent market of Japan is driven very much by foreign investors, okay? Which is shown by a gray chart. Okay? So, especially after 2000, the buyers are mostly foreign investors. Okay? That is shown by gray chart, right? Okay. But look at what's going on in 1980s. They were selling. Okay? Foreign investors were selling. But they knew that, Japanese share prices were kind of too high. It's not worth buying. So they were kind of smart, knowing that, Japanese shares were too high, they were not buying. In a sense, that is not too smart because even if they thought that, it is too high, still Japanese shares were, rising up to 1989. They got out of the market too early. But even so, they were buying. They were selling. Okay? So who are buying? Who are buying the stupidly high Japanese shares? Domestic investors. Okay? Blue bar is the non-financial corporation. Not only individual investors, but also corporation, and also red part, financial institutions. Those guys were buying. Okay? So professionals, businessmen, were buying aggressively, super expensive, Japanese shares. That damaged those guys during 1990s when the Japanese shares collapsed. Who made money? Well, during 1980s, Japanese people made money by, ever-rising Japanese shares. But if they sold all shares at this point, when the bubble started collapsing, then the investment was successful. But nobody could do that. So when in 1990s, when the share prices began collapsing, everybody was hurt. Okay? That's what that created the heavy damage of the Japanese economy in 1990s. Is this clear so far? Okay, so now let me talk about the sad part, which is the 1990s. Yeah? Okay, so I'm going to talk about those kind of things. Collapse of the bubble, demography, deflation, increased public debt, and I will mention public poverty. Okay, so like I said, in 1990s, asset prices began collapsing. Well, what happened then? Well, people were borrowing money, right? People were borrowing money, and they spent that money. They invested that money into stocks or real estate. But the price of real estate, price of stocks began collapsing. Then what happened? They cannot pay back. Right? So borrowers got stuck. Okay? So they were eager to pay their debt back. As a result, they stopped spending. That's damaging to the macroeconomy. Okay? And also the borrowers were hurt, so the lenders got stuck as well. Right? There arose huge amount of bad debts, problem loans. Okay? And obviously, if financial institutions are ill, the macroeconomy doesn't function. Okay? So that's the what was going on in Japan. And another problem was public spending increased. Why is that? Because the government tried to save the economy. Okay? The aggregate demand was insufficient. So to save the economy, the government tried to spend a lot. That created the public that increased the public spending, which tentatively saved the economy. But after all, we eventually had the huge amount of public debt. Yeah, I'm going to come back to that. Okay, so let me talk about this. Okay, so show you a couple of charts. Okay. What is this? This is the ratio of private debt to nominal GDP. Okay. Well, like I said, during the bubble economy, people are borrowing money, so the ratio of the private debt to nominal GDP was increasing. Okay. But since then, this ratio began declining. This process is called deleveraging. Okay. Well, in the finance class, you learn that the debt to equity ratio is often called financial leverage. Okay? So when somebody is borrowing money, that's called this process is called leveraging. Okay? And when the ratio is declining, that is called deleveraging. Okay? Well, in general, when people are borrowing money, that's good for the economy. At least, that's good for the growth of the economy. But when the deleveraging is going on, that's bad. That's bad for the growth of the aggregate economy. Okay? And that process was going on up to the middle of 2000s. Oh, serious. Okay? Well, so because of this, excess capacity problem was evident. Okay. Well, let me explain this chart. This is created by the data of Bank of Japan. This is based on survey, actually. Okay. Occasionally, the Bank of Japan survey Japanese corporations, asking about the what do you think about the level of current capacity relative to the demand? Is your capacity enough, or is your capacity insufficient? People? No, they want to hire people, which is bad for the economy. Well, that's what's going on in Japan during 1990s. Yeah. Well, this is the same kind of data for the employment. Yeah. Well, during 1980s, many corporations were saying that the people's level is insufficient. We need to hire more people. But since 1990s, they persistently said that the level of employment is kind of excessive. Yeah, so basically, they said that they want to fire people. They want to restructure the corporation. What a sad state. Nevertheless, look at this. Oh, before I say nevertheless, I'm sorry. Okay? Look at this chart. This shows the unemployment rate. Okay? Well, naturally, since 1990, unemployment rate began rising. Okay? And at the peak of the early 2000s, it's something like 5.5% or something like that. Okay? What do you think? What's the? Let me ask you. What's the unemployment rate in Taiwan right now? Can anybody tell me? 4 or 5, right? Well, so compare that to the Japanese level. Well, so far I said that during 1990s, the Japanese economy was terrible. Japanese corporations were saying that the people's level was excessive. They wanted to hire people. Nevertheless, so as a result, unemployment rate rose, but still the level was 5%, which is the same as the unemployment rate in Taiwan. Isn't this strange? What do you think is the unemployment rate in Spain? Does anybody have an idea? More than 10, yes. The answer is 22%. Okay? Well, people say that the European economy right now is not good, but well, so generally, unemployment rate rates in European countries are quite high, but in Spain, it's 22%. Yeah, even in France, it's quite high. It's something like 10%. 10 to 15%. Okay. So relative to that, what do you think? The Japanese, everybody said that the Japanese economy is no good. Still, unemployment rate is 5%. Isn't this interesting? Guess what? What do you think is going on? What do you think explains this low unemployment rate, in spite of the fact that the economic growth of Japan is quite low? What would you explain? Any guess? I think you can guess as a business student. Any brave guess? Okay, so I'm sorry. I like your response. So let me point you. Okay, Lusan. Mr. Lu.
I just guess. I think everyone wanna get some job today. They run just for bank or for the real estate. I think.
So you say that the to maintain the job, people.
So in the situation, they can accept the lower pay.
Oh, okay. So the people are accepting the low wage instead of maintaining the maintaining the job. Okay. Well, that explains a lot actually. Wage didn't grow. Wage didn't grow. that's not a wrong answer. You know, actually, that explains a lot. Yes.
Because Chinese culture, they don't, yeah, they do their job all of their life.
Right. Have you ever heard the word lifetime employment? You know, let me write down. Maybe I don't have to write. You know, lifetime employment. You know? Do you have such kind of system in Taiwan?
No.
Somebody said yes. Somebody said no. Who said yes? Yes. Okay.
I don't know. I don't know about in Taiwan, but as I see the case in Europe, their government allowance is very good for the people. So people they don't want to work very hard. But for the Asian people, we don't have very good government allowance. So people need to working hard to keep maintain their life. So they cannot lose the job. And all the innovation is depend on the industrial to investment. However, at this moment, no one wants to spend money for this kind of bad economy. This is what I think.
Okay, so well, maybe in Taiwan, you know, lifetime employment is not common, but still, you know, like what's your name? You know, Chu-san. Chu. You know, like Chu-san said. Well, maybe you know Asian people are diligent, so you know the governance system, you know, does not have to be you know so strong. So the you know, in general, if people are not lazy, if workers are not lazy, you know, labor market has to be quite flexible, you know. Otherwise, you know, if people think that they may be fired at any point in time, you know, that's gonna be the motivational force for them to work hard. But you know, if people are you know diligent, you know, that kind of mechanism doesn't have to work. Okay, so that might be a good explanation behind the you know, lifetime employment of the Japanese companies. In any case, in Japan, you know, lifetime employment is common. Even now, it's common actually. Okay. Well, I'm not sure about what's going on in the in your university, but in my case, you know, when I joined the this school, you know, 3 years ago, okay, I was told that you know if I like, I can stay here up to the age of 65, even if I do not write any paper, even if student evaluation is bad, still I can work, I can stay here up to 65. Well, you know, this is such a lucrative system. Well, so I do not have any motivation to work hard here.
So you don't have to sign a contract or just a promise?
Right, you know, just a promise. Well, you know, the contract basically said that, you know, basically I'm not going to be fired until the age of 65. Okay?
But after 65?
After 65, it depends. Okay? If I'm good, probably, you know, they may offer me that you know, you are so good that please keep working here or anything like that. And also, you know, you know, marginal, you know, bonus, you know, depends on my performance. You know, if I write a lot of good paper, and if the student evaluation is good, my bonus is going to be good. But even if, you know, I do not write any paper, you know, student evaluation is bad, you know, I am not going to be fired. Okay? That's the, you know, Japanese labor market. Well, in a sense, that's good. You know, I feel secured, okay? And my family member also feels that you know, they are secured. That's good. In contrast, you know, well, the NUCB hires a lot of you know, professors from foreign countries, including Asian countries. and somehow, their contract is only 1 year. Yeah? So every year they need to sign up. Okay? And whenever they leave this school, they say that well, they want to feel more secure. This school needs to show some kind of commitment to the long-term relationship between the school and the professor. But they need to sign up every year. They say they don't like that. Yeah. So in a sense, okay, the job security is a good thing. However, this also creates a problem. Okay? Let me come back to the problem, the aspect of the problems of this thing. Okay. But let me move on. Okay. In late 1990s, financial crisis, took on. Well, the reason is obvious. Back in 1980s, lenders were lending a lot, and the borrowers were using that money, invested in real estate and stocks, but the prices of real estate and stocks collapsed, so the lenders got stuck. Okay? Well, this is the picture when one investment bank, collapsed, went bankrupt in 1997. Well, the reason I showed this picture is that, well, this is a kind of good illustration of the corporate culture of Japan. Well, look, he's crying. He's the president, actually. Okay? He's the president of Yamaichi Securities, and he's crying. Okay? Why is he crying? He said that. Well, here's what he said. Okay? Well, our employees are not bad. I'm responsible for everything. That's what he said. And he cried. Okay? What do you think? Okay? How would you explain? Well, you're laughing. Why do you laugh? Is this funny?
No.
No, it's not funny. Okay, so what's your comment on the fact that he's smiling? Say something, freely. Yeah. Well, in Japan, it is generally, generally speaking, it is considered that, maintenance of employees is the responsibility of the corporation, in particular, president. And because he is trying basically, to say that he's sorry for the society because he could not deliver that kind of social promise. Okay? Well, I do not see any other countries where presidents cry when the company went bankrupt. Okay? This very unique aspect of the Japan. Well, I'm not saying that this is good, but this is very unique, I would say. Okay. Well, so the bad debt problem was quite significant in late 1990s and early 2000s. And here, what I show here is the amount of bad loans at major Japanese banks. Fortunately, by the middle of 2000, it's gone, basically. So by mid-2000s, Japan's post-bubble problems were mostly over, which is good. Yeah? However, in 2000, kind of new problem, arose. That's the demographic problem. Okay. Well, the problem is obviously not new at the time, but people did not realize that this is the problem until middle of 2000. Well, look at the effect. Right? This is the this blue line shows the total population of Japan, which seemed to peak in 2008 or 9. And they are forecast. It's easy to forecast population, right? And it's expected to decline, keep on declining. Well, what's interesting is that, if you take a look at this thin blue part, which shows the working age population, which is the population of aging 20 to 65 or something like that. Yeah? Well, the working age population peaked a lot earlier, like middle of 1990. Yeah? We should have, looking back, we should have recognized the population seriousness of population problem in 1990, but we didn't actually. Well, here's the comparison of population growth rate across major advanced countries. Japan, US, UK, and in the next page I show the Euro area, Germany, France, right? And okay, so the this line chart shows the growth rate, year change in the total population. And like I said, in the case of Japan, it was 1% in 50s to the middle of 70s, but right now it's bigger. Okay? And this bar chart, has two parts, right? The blue part shows the what they call natural change, and the red part is the contribution from net migration, immigration. Okay? And look, in the case of US, okay, even today, the population growth is roughly speaking 0.8%, and half of the contribution is coming from natural change, but the other half of the contribution is coming from migration. Okay? That's the strength of the United States. Okay? But look, in the case of Japan, it's zero. Right? Not only that, natural change is zero. Also, migration is zero. Right? Well, this can be changed by the policy, right? Right? If people agree on that policy. So you can ask, Japanese people about what do you think about the migration? Right? Well, given that the economy is stagnating, it's obvious that we need more population growth. Yeah? Why don't you consider, migration? You can ask Japanese people. Yeah? If you go visit Toyota this afternoon, ask this question. That's a very good question, I think. Yeah? Please ask that question. Yeah? Now tell me, email me about the answer. Well, simply put, the social consensus is not obtained yet about the migration. That's why the government, do not raise this issue. Even if it's obvious that Japan needs, a bit of more, migrated people. Well, the same thing can be said about the what about the UK? Okay? Most of the population growth is coming from the growth of migration, right? Okay? Well, same thing can be said about Euro area is coming from migration. Of course, this kind of causes a serious problem, like what we saw recently in France. Okay? Well, many of the migrated people are coming from Islamic countries, so obviously there's tension, cultural tension between them. Nevertheless, in order to promote economic growth, this is a kind of must. Japan needs a modification of the migration policy in future. Well, France is a kind of a bit different story. Natural change is high, right? Does everybody know, what kind of factors are contributing to the natural, high, relatively high, positive natural change of French population? No? Are there anybody who are familiar with the French situation? Well, in the case of France, what they call, out of bedrock, marriage, out of bedrock, children, is socially accepted. That's quite different, than any other cultures. I think that that kind of cultural change is necessary in Japan as well. So I'm asking my wife that she should admit that I have more girlfriends. But she wouldn't. I want you guys to convince her. Okay, so aging. Okay. Well, this is the this what? This is the ratio of elderly population. Okay. It's horrible, right? Elderly. This is the elderly population. So probably people who are above 60. Okay. Ratio of people above 60. That was 5% in 1950, but it is expected to rise up to 30% by 2030. Well, it's already the case in rural area of Japan. Probably you do not have time to visit, rural area of Japan. But if you visit, some rural area, in some cases, more than 50% of the population is the aged people. So if you look around, you can find lots of old people. That's the case of my neighborhood as well. I'm relatively free as a professor here. So sometimes I during the daytime I to physically train myself. I jump rope. Yeah? And then the old, my neighbors, old ladies, come to me. They like to talk to me. They say, "Oh, you are so good." And they are quite annoying. They are free. They have time. So they want to keep talking to me. I want to concentrate on my jump roping, but they keep talking to me. Okay, here's the comparison of aging, aging situation, across countries. Like I said, that's at the Japan's unique problem. Although Japan's problem is the most extreme. Okay, so what's the root cause of this declining population? Obviously, the declining fertility rate. Okay? Well, first of all, what's the fertility rate? Fertility rate is the number of children per family, okay? Per household. Okay? So, in order for the population to be constant, roughly speaking, it has to be 2, right? There are 2 parents. So in order for the population to be constant, the fertility rate has to be above 2. Okay? Up to 1970s, it was above 2. But right now, it's almost 1.2. What about in Taiwan? What do you think is the fertility rate in Taiwan? It's declining, across countries. This is common to all nations in the world. Okay, so what do you think is the even worse? Even worse. So you guys do not make any children. Why not? Well, this is serious, you know.
You must ask the young.
Right. Well, this is a bit serious problem. This is a bit serious problem. Okay? Well, you know, because you have the same problem, you can guess what's going on in Japan. But still, you know, this is the root cause of the declining population, and which is damaging for the aggregate growth of the macroeconomy. Okay? Well, I'm not saying that you should make a child or anything like that. You know, I'm not saying that. But, you know, this is what's going on in Japan, and this is common to, you know, many nations, you know, in the world, and which is damaging to the macroeconomic growth. Okay, well, like I said, you know, one of the problems of Japan was that the recognition of this problem was quite late. You know, recognition delay. Okay, this is a kind of funny chart. Okay. Well, what I showed here is the actual, you know, fertility rate here, okay, which is shown by blue line, and what I showed by green line is the forecast of the fertility rate by the government. Okay? So, you know, back in 1976, you know, the fertility rate began declining a little bit, but the government was saying that, you know, the decline was kind of tentative, so the probably in future the fertility rate is going to improve. You know, that's what the government was saying. Okay? In 1990, you know, the fertility rate declined significantly, but even so, the government was saying that it's going to improve. Okay? Even in 2002, you know, it was saying something like that. Okay? Okay? In the mid of 2000, you know, finally they admitted that the fertility rate, you know, would not, you know, improve. Okay? I don't know how it is called, you know, maybe overconfidence or something like that. But in any case, you know, the delay of recognizing problem was one of the problems which caused this situation. Well, the point of this chart is the same thing. Well, this is the kind of newspaper citation on low birth rate. Okay? Which shows which is shown by red line. During 1990, you know, people are paying attention to the bubble economy, the collapse of the bubble, you know, which is shown by blue line. In 2000, people were paying attention to you know, non-performing loan or anything like that. So the you know, finally, in late 2000, you know, they recognized the problem. That's kind of too late. Okay, obviously the population aging is burdensome to the economy. Let me rush a little bit. Okay, let me talk about inflation. This is the consumer price index in Japan. Like I said at the beginning, since 1990, it's been almost flat. So the inflation, no inflation, zero inflation is going on. Well, this is the same thing. This is the year change in consumer price. You know, it's almost flat. You know, it's almost zero. Okay, so you know, what's bad about you know, this zero inflation or, you know, negative inflation? Well, very bad actually. Compare, you know, these two situations. Well, if you know, sales is going up by a positive 5%, and cost 5%, then the profit is growing by 5%, right? But let's say that the inflation is also, you know, 5%. Then in real term, you know, even if profit is going up by 5%, you know, it's zero, right? You know, in the real term, you know, profit growth is zero. But I want you to compare this situation versus this. Okay? If sales is declining by 5%, costs are also declining 5%, profit is going to decline by 5%, and inflation is negative 5%. So deflation is going. Okay? In the real term, even if profit is declining, real profit growth is 0 because inflation is negative 5. Okay? But what do you think? Let's call this situation A. Let's call this situation B. Which would you prefer? How many of you would prefer situation B? How many of you would prefer situation A? Yeah, A is preferred, right? Even if in the real term, the situation is the same. Okay? So people generally prefer this situation to this. Okay? This is something called the money illusion. Okay? Well, people like growth. Okay? People do not like shrinkage. Okay? So even if real growth is the same, still people would prefer this. So if people think that the things are shrinking, they do not spend. Okay? They do not hire people, okay? Which is no good for the economy. Okay? So here's what's going on. Okay? First of all, wage naturally, because the inflation is not positive, wages are not growing, okay? Which is bad. Okay? Whenever they get paycheck, okay? they get salary, description. They think that things are not growing. This is no good. Okay? How miserable it is. Okay? Bank loan is not growing. Like I said, bank loan is a driver of the macroeconomy, which is not growing. And what's really bad is that during the inflation, people do not take risks. Okay? Well, if they think that inflation is ongoing, to hedge that risk, people have an incentive to invest some money into risky assets, okay? Like stocks. But if people think that the inflation is going on, they just deposit their money into safe assets, like bank deposit. And look at what's going on. In Japan, this is the comparison of composition of household financial assets. Okay? Let me start with the U.S. Okay? In the case of U.S., the ratio of cash and deposits is just 10%. Okay? In the case of Eurozone, it's roughly 30%. In the case of Japan, ratio of cash and deposits is almost half. Okay? So people do not take risk. And this is just only one aspect of people's risk attitude. Okay? Like this shows, during the deflation, people's mentality tend to shrink, and people do not take risk. Okay? That's no good. Okay? Okay, so this is the composition of household assets, but this is the ratio of cash holding by Japanese companies. Okay? Not only households hoard to cash, but also Japanese corporations hoard to cash. Okay? No good. Spend more money. Okay? Public spending. Okay? Well, because the macroeconomy is not growing, the government tried to spend. Okay? So, because the economy is no good, tax revenue, which is shown by a gray line, keeps on declining. And in the meantime, government expenditures kept increasing. So what's the result? Deficit. Okay? And the government debt. The government financed this money by borrowing. So the public debt accumulate. By the way, there's a nickname for this chart. This is a famous chart, actually. The nickname of this chart is mouth of crocodile. Does it look like mouth of crocodile? Okay, so here's the ratio of government debt to GDP. Okay? It's now roughly 200%. 200%. And relative to other countries, it's the highest. Yeah. Japan, there's a comparison of public spending to public debt to GDP ratio. Japan's ratio is almost 200%, which is the highest across many countries in the world. You know, it's even higher than Greece or Italy. Terrible. Yeah. And given this situation, still, you know, the Japanese government is issuing, you know, issuing bonds, okay? And they are selling bonds to the public. Okay? Do you want to buy the Japanese the bonds issued by the Japanese government? You know, given this situation, you know, nobody say yes. Yeah. However, you know, if nobody wants to buy Japanese government bonds, then the interest rates should rise, right? No? Because the demand for the bonds should be weaker, price of the bond should go down, and in turn, interest rates of the Japanese government bond should go higher, okay? However, like you see, the Japanese government bond yield kept declining. Why is that? Still, demand for the Japanese government bond is strong. Who's buying this? That's the case of the U.S. government bonds. Chinese people are buying, you know, the U.S. government bonds, right? But in the case of Japan, you know, that's not the case. Japanese people are buying. Yeah, Japanese people are buying Japanese government bonds. Somehow, you know, they still think that the Japanese government bond, the Japanese government is not gonna go bankruptcy. You know, they still believe everything is gonna be safe. Okay, so look. Okay, in the case of Japan, in the case of this holdings of Japanese government bonds. Okay, where's foreigners? Well, gray part is the ownership by foreigners. It's only 5%. So this means that 95% of the Japanese government bonds are owned by Japanese people, okay? Mainly banks. What do you think? What a safe country. Okay, so you know, for the last 20 years or so, you know, this is a composition of Japanese banks' assets, and you know, they do not find, you know, good opportunities of making loans, and instead they are buying, you know, Japanese government bonds. Yeah? Well, so that's the current situation, which is quite. Let me raise another interesting issue, you know, which has something to do with the stagnation of the Japanese economy. That's the profitability of Japanese companies, and in more general, you know, corporate culture of Japan. Well, first thing I want you to pay attention is the comparison of return on equity for Japan, U.S. and Europe. Okay? Well, like you see, you know, this is the you know, average, you know, ROE of Europe, you know, which is 15%. Okay? Well, in the case of U.S., it's 22%. Japan, 5%. ROE, 5%. Okay? What do you think? Is that high? No, it's quite low. Okay? Maybe in finance class, you learn that the ROE should be compared with the required return by equity investors. You know, that's called cost of equity. Okay? Cost of equity is usually something like 10%. Yeah? If you want to make an investment into stocks, what's the expected return of yours? You would say 5%? No, because the stocks are risky. You would say that you would need 10% or something like that. Okay? But the return on equity in Japan is much lower than that. That's 5%. Okay? And maybe in the accounting class you learn the decomposition of return on equity. Okay? This is the return on sales. Sales divided by equity. The profit divided by sales. Okay? And also, turnover ratio and leverage. Okay? Well, in terms of these two, okay, Japan is no different than US or Europe. But in terms of return on sales, this is very different. Okay? So simply put, Japanese companies' profitability is quite low, very, very low. Okay? Well, later, if you visit Toyota, okay, you can ask them. Well, but by the way, today's Nikkei covered that today's head story of Nikkei was that, well, Toyota is gonna report the historical high earnings in this fiscal year. So maybe Toyota is gonna say that they are earning high earnings or something like that. So don't hurt their feelings. Okay. You may say that congratulations for the historical high earnings or something like that. But I heard this morning that in general Japanese companies' profitability is so low. What do you think is the reason? That's the question you should ask. Okay. Okay. Look at this. Okay? This is the return on equity of most recent fiscal year of many major companies. Okay? Apple, 33%. Google, 14%. Caterpillar, 21%. Walmart, 20%. Bed Bath and Breakfast, 28%. All of them are major U.S. companies. Japan, Toyota, okay? 14%. Not bad, but still, not too good. Okay? NT&T, that's Nippon Telecom or something like that. Telephone and telephone, 7%. Komatsu, 12%. Seven & I, 8%. Yamada Denki, 3.5%. Well, here's the data for Taiwan actually. I found that in Taiwan, things are not too bad, although things are not too good either. But anyway, this is the ratio of companies whose ROE is less than 0. This shows the 0 to 5. Green part shows the 5 to 10. In the case of Japan, majority of companies' ROEs are less than 10%, okay? Which is quite unique, relative to the rest of the world. Okay? So, let me ask you, what do you think are factors that help to explain Japanese companies' low profitability? Does anybody have an idea? What do you think? I want to have at least one of them. Either you or you. What do you think? Any opinion? Low profitability. What do you think?
Compared to the other country or just
Compared to the other countries.
the cost having high net so the property is low.
Okay. Okay. So how does that affect the profitability? Because interest rates are low, probably Japanese companies do not have to raise profitability. Is that your opinion? Probably. Yeah, that may be one factor. So basically, in Japan, inflation rate is low, interest rates are low, so maybe they do not have to, make such money. They don't to pay back interest for their banks. It's not difficult. Yeah. So that explains low profitability. That's one opinion. But let me say this: even in 1980s, Japanese companies' profitability was low when the interest rates were high. Yeah. So deflation is one factor, but that's not the only factor. Okay, so here are my explanation. Okay. So deflation is one factor. Yeah. Obviously, during in the deflationary economy, it's hard to raise prices. Like I said, risk aversion of Japanese companies may be one factor. Well, if the risk of assets is low, then the return is also low. Lack of innovation. I'm going to come back to this issue in a minute. But one of the most important things about Japanese companies is that insensitivity to shareholders' demand. This is one of the corporate culture. Well, this is the frequently heard complaint from foreign investors. Actually. Well, the root. So basically, many foreign investors say that the Japanese companies are not friendly to shareholders. Okay? They are not conscious. They are not very willing to make high returns for shareholders. That's what many foreign investors say. Okay? And there are reasons actually why that is the case. Okay? The factor that has a lot to do with this is something called cross-shareholding. Maybe you have heard about this, cross-shareholding. Can anybody explain what's the cross-shareholding? Well, the cross-shareholding is a kind of simple system. Mr. Lu is running company A, Iwasawa is running company B, and company A owns company B's share. Instead, company B owns company A's share. Yeah, that's the cross-shareholding. Yeah. Oh, there's a Taiwanese name for that. How do you call that? Okay, now everybody understands. Yeah. What's the purpose of that activity? What's the purpose of that system? Well, what's kind of good for managers is that, okay, well, in the shareholders meeting, okay, I have Mr. Lu's company's shares. I can participate in the shareholders meeting of Mr. Lu's company, but probably I would not say anything in the shareholders meeting. I'm going to be silent. Okay? I'm going to accept everything that is offered by Mr. Lu. And instead, Mr. Lu does the same thing in my company's shareholders meeting. Okay? What's ignored is the requirement by other minority shareholders. Okay? Well, this cross-shareholdings was very prominent, until the 1980s. Okay? At the end of 1980s, ratio of Japanese shares held as a form of cross-shareholding was something like 60%. So the majority of Japanese shares were cross-held. Okay? So at that period, the Japanese companies' managers do not have to worry anything about the minority holders' requirement. Okay? Well, in 1990, for the past 20 years or so, because the share prices declined, this system, collapsed. Okay? Japanese companies are not afford to own, shares anymore. So cross-shareholding, collapsed. But even so, company's mentality does not change in one day. So still, they tend to be unfriendly to minority shareholders. Okay? So that's the kind of root cause of the low profitability of the Japanese companies. And one other thing, which is important is the this thing. I already mentioned this. Japanese companies generally think that maintenance of the employees is a kind of social responsibility. There's a social consensus about that. So even if productivity of employees is low, usually, the companies do not fire. Is that good for the profitability? No way. That's bad. Okay? That explains one. That is definitely one reason behind the low profitability of Japanese companies. Okay, so this has something to do with one aspect of the Japanese companies. And this is the median CEO compensation. And okay, so Japan is here. Okay, there's no Taiwan. Sorry, but China is here. Okay. Those are not mostly national companies, so the pay is quite low. The U.S., wow, I can't express. Right? So even don't initiate the business in Japan. Even if you are successful and you become CEO, median pay is something like this, right, in Japan. Right? So the income inequality in Japan is quite low actually, relative to the rest of the world. Yeah. But even so, have you heard of the economist named Thomas Piketty? No? So you haven't heard of the Thomas Piketty, okay? Tom Piketty, who wrote the book, called the Thomas Piketty, who wrote a best-selling business book, last year, like the Capital in the 21st century. Well, so looks like in Taiwan, even business students, have not heard about this name. Okay? Well, for the last 1 week, he was in Japan, and he was widely covered by the mass media. What he was saying is that, terrible things are ongoing in the global economy right now. The income inequality, wealth inequality, those things are widening. Okay? Rich people tend to become richer and richer. Poor people tend to become poorer and poorer, which is bad. That's basically what Thomas Piketty said. Okay? Like I said, Japanese inequality is quite small relative to the rest of the world. But even so, he is very popular in Japan, which shows that how sensitive Japanese people are to the income inequality. Okay? So he's been very popular in Japan. Okay? Well, visit bookshop. You can find many. You can find wide area which covers his book. Okay? So if you visit bookshop, it's quite obvious that he's a superstar in Japan right now. Yeah? Okay. Okay. So let me finally talk about the policy response of the economy in Japan. On your left hand side, there's a prime minister of us, his name is Mr. Abe. And the right hand side is the governor of the Bank of Japan, whose name is Kuroda. And he is saying that he's going to restore good old Japan. And what does he do? What he's trying to do, basically, the couple of things in monetary policy, the Bank of Japan target inflation rate of 2%. Okay, and they say that they do anything until inflation rate becomes 2%. What do they do? I'm going to come back to that. Okay, and fiscal policy. We need to restore the fiscal healthiness. So the basic idea is that the government is going to raise consumption tax rate, okay? Which is currently 8%, which was raised actually. Until recently it was 5%. It's now 8%. And the government is saying that it's going to be raised further. And there are other couple of economic growth strategies. One of the core is to the empowering of the women, and that's the funding of this presentation. Okay, so let's take a look at the actions of the Bank of Japan. Okay, so this is a statement made by the Bank of Japan in April 2013. Look at the bold statement. In the first line, the bank should do whatever is necessary to overcome the inflation. That's what they said. Okay, and following price stability target of 2% as its responsibility. Okay? So what do they do? Well, here's what they do. Okay, they basically said that they're gonna increase the what they call monetary base. Okay? What's the monetary base? Well, you may have learned from the macroeconomic class. Well, monetary base is the kind of base of money, which is completely controlled by the central bank. Yeah? And they say that they're gonna increase monetary base 60 to 70 trillion annually. That's what they said at the beginning. And recently they upgraded this number to 80 trillion yen. Okay? So they basically said that they're going to be even more aggressive. Okay? So what's the effect of this action? Before that, how do they do that? What do they do? Okay, so here's the chart of monetary base. Okay, so before Kuroda, new governor, here's the chart of the Japan's monetary base. Okay, it was growing, but steadily growing. But after Kuroda, what happened to monetary base? So what's going on? Okay, some strange things are going on, right? Okay, so here's how they increase monetary base. Okay. Okay, so maybe this is a good illustration. Okay. Here's how Bank of Japan expands its monetary base actually. Okay. Okay. So maybe before that, okay. So what does it mean by increase in the monetary base? Well, when the central bank increases monetary base, that basically means that the central bank's assets, size of the balance sheet expands. Okay. I don't know, how many people, how many of you have seen the balance sheet of the central bank, but the balance sheet of central bank, looks like this. Yeah? Well, on the right-hand side, here's the balance sheet of central bank. Okay? Central bank, like Bank of Japan. Okay? On the right-hand side of the balance sheet, there's a currency. Okay? Okay, like Japanese yen. Okay? Well, what currency is the liability of the central bank? Well, there's a reason, but I don't have time to explain that. Anyway, that's the liability of the central bank. Okay, and on the asset side, there are many assets, such as gold. Okay, but in the case of Japan, okay, the majority of these assets is actually JGB. Okay, Japan government bonds. Okay. So, when the asset of the central bank increases, what's going to happen is that, okay, here's the process, okay? The Bank of Japan prints money, okay? Literally prints money, okay? Prints money, and using that money, they buy government bonds from the market, okay? From markets, okay? The seller is the banks, okay? Banks have the JGB, so they sell JGB to the central bank. Okay? So, on the private bank's balance sheet, they used to have government bonds, but now they sold, and instead they have lots of cash, which is called bank reserve. Okay? So that's what's going on. Okay? So basically, what's going on is that the government, I'm sorry, the central bank is printing money, okay? Printing Japanese yen. Okay? So, I sometimes dream that I'm going to be a owner of the central bank. If I'm the owner of the central bank, I can create money. Okay? Isn't that lucrative? Okay? That's what the central bank is doing right now. Okay? They print money, 80 trillion yen per year or something like that. Okay? Well, how does that affect the economy? Well, not much, because all of the cash stays at the balance sheet of the banks, private bank. Okay? So not much is going on. But still, one obvious effect is that people think that eventually the value of Japanese yen is going to be weaker. Okay? Isn't that natural? They are printing money, quite harshly. Okay? Do you want this kind of currency a lot? Do you like this? No. Okay? The government is, the central bank is, aggressively printing. Okay? There's not much value of that. Okay? So the effect is appeared in the FX market actually. Okay? The yen, ever since the initiation of that policy, okay, the Japanese yen weakened significantly against the US dollar. Okay? Before Corona, the yen versus US dollar was 80, but now it's 120. Okay? Well, maybe you would feel this difference because what I show here is the Japanese Taiwan dollar against Japanese yen. Okay? Back before Corona, it was 2.5. Okay? But if you have one Taiwan dollar, now you can buy almost 4 Japanese yen. Japanese yen is now cheap. Okay? So go shopping. Okay? Now you will feel that. Many Japanese things are cheap. Okay? So that's the effect of the this aggressive monetary policy. Okay? At least, foreign tourists, number of foreign tourists are growing. It's quite rapidly because the Japanese things are cheaper, okay? Which is inflationary, not bad. Okay? What's bad is that I'm making money in the Japanese yen, So when I go abroad, you know, I have to convert my yen to the US dollar or anything like that. Now I feel painful. Whenever I go abroad, you know, I feel that wow, it's expensive. So that's the negative part of this policy. But positive part is the you guys, you know, you can spend a lot in Japan, which is inflation. So probably, you know, this is going to be an effective tool to reflation, you know, reflate the Japanese economy. Of course, there's a downside, you know, negative side, but you know, I do not have much time to talk about that. So let me skip that. So let me skip the you know, government public expenditure part and the for the final in a couple of minutes and then the agreement. Okay. So now the Japanese government is trying to promote more women to be more productive. Look at the chart. Okay? This is the female labor participation and share of foreign labor in across many countries. In both metrics, you know, Japan is the one of the lowest. Okay? And the to reflate the economy, okay, you know, either or both, you know, increase of the female labor participation and or the share of foreign labor is necessary. But like I said, you know, there's no social consensus about you know, increasing the share of foreign labor in Japan yet. So the remaining, you know, option is to rely on this, you know, female labor participation. Yeah? Well, here's the female labor, you know, female labor participation distribution across 22 countries. You know, back in 1985, you know, Japan was almost the middle of you know, many countries, but now we are lagging a lot, you know, relative to the rest of the world. Okay? So there's a lot of room for you know, advancing this policy. Okay, so one thing, you know, the government can easily do is to increase the child care facility. Okay? Well, this is on the you know, vertical, on the horizontal axis. You know, this is the child care facility per child. Okay? The level of Japan is quite low. Okay? And there's a positive correlation between the child care per child and the children per women, obviously. So it's quite natural that the government, you know, puts an effort to increase the number of child care facilities, right? Which should be good for, you know, those young women to get married, right? And to continue, you know, working. Right? Okay, so you know, the point of this is the same. Right? Enrollment of small children in formal child care, the Japan's level is, you know, low relative to the rest of the world. Okay? Well, this is something, you know, that the government can easily, you know, do. You know, what's not easy is the corporate culture, okay? Which kind of prevents women to participate more in the productive actions. This is the ratio of female managers in Japan. Well, in the case of U.S., it's almost half. Half of the managers is you know, female. Well, look around. Look around this class. Half of students, half of business students are female. This is the standard globally. But in Japan, only 10%, which is no good. Okay? So why is that? Okay? Obviously, the part of the problem is that, you know, men are saying that, you know, well, like men are more talented than the female women, So the women shouldn't be a manager or something like that. You know, there are some bad men like that. You know, still, okay. But not necessarily. You know, that's the only. You know, it's not necessarily the case that that's the only problem. Okay? The other more important problem is the willingness of the young women to participate more in the productive action. Okay? Well, here's a chart showing that point. Okay, so now focus on this. Okay, this is the share of companies with equal promotion. Okay, so now almost 50%. In recent years, okay, almost 50% of the companies adopt equal promotion policy for male and female. Okay? So at least formally, the companies treat men and women equally. Okay? So there's no discrimination or anything like that. As for 50% of the companies. Okay? Nevertheless, okay? Now look at this. Okay? This is the share of newly hired, what they call sogoshoku. Sogoshoku means career track. Okay? Usually when Japanese companies hire people, there are two courses, career track and non-career track. Okay? Okay? And this is a share of newly hired, female career track. Okay? And only 10% of the young women pursue the career track. Okay? So this means that majority of Japanese female even now do not pursue career track. They do not think that even if they are promoted in the society, in the companies, they will not be necessarily happy. Yeah? That's what they think. Yeah. Maybe because of the lack of the child care facility or anything like that, and that is changing right now. But I don't know. Still this kind of issue remains. You can ask many Japanese girls, Japanese young workers. Well, the NUCB has lots of Japanese workers. If you look back, all are female. Yeah? So in this sense, the NUCB is kind of advancing. Yeah? But you can ask them. Are you likely to be promoted? Are you likely to be promoted? Do you want to be promoted? Anything like that. Yeah? You can ask. Well, I hope you enjoyed the presentation. Let me conclude. Okay? Okay, so lots of problems. We've learned there are lots of problems of the Japanese economy, deflation, demography, public debt, and corporate culture. And Japan is struggling to overcome these problems. But like I said, like I emphasized already, well, many of them are not Japan unique problems. Like European countries have mostly the same kind of problems to Japan, and probably well, some problems are shared even with Taiwan, like low fertility rate. So Japan problem is not unique. Probably more or less many countries are going to face the same kind of problems as Japan sooner or later. So in that sense, you can learn a lot from Japan's experience. Unless there are any questions, comments, criticisms, let me conclude. That's it. Thank you very much.
I believe we all agree we learn more from the Professor Iwasawa's speech. So let's thank Professor Iwasawa let's offer our big hand. Express our appreciation for the USAWA's lecture. And I want to present our gift today. Okay. So, 1, 2.
Wow. Oh, thank you very much. So kind of you.
Thank you very much for joining this lecture. And his specialty research field is behavioral economics and finance. And if you are interested in this field, please come back again to our school to take this class. So from now on, this facility is very small, as you know, but we will guide you other classroom facilities shortly. And my staff has given you the number figure on the left one. So we divide into 3 groups. And number 1 group, first group, and second 3. So the and then my staffs and me will bring each groups and guide you. And then go back to the lobby. Yeah, you can leave your luggage here.
各位同我们合照一下，那旁边要靠近一点哦。
好。
我们第3组的漂亮，所以后来男生都过来几走。
真的。